Ken, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
My pleasure.
I know you're jet lagged. You just came in the other day.
Right.
You had a big dinner last night.
Yes.
But I've been knowing you for what? How old is your oldest son?
22.
20 years I've known you, almost.
Yeah.
Because I think you brought them in there when they were babies almost.
Yeah, we joined membership, I want to say, geez, 98, 99 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we moved from Hong Kong after the handover in 97.
That's right, that's right. Wow. Let me ask, I like to start off with a lot of different, I'm trying to do this one a little bit different than I've done the ones in the past. But I still want to know some basic things, like where were you born?
Honolulu.
Honolulu. How old were you when you left Honolulu?
Well, we used to come back every summer. My mom's Japanese.
Okay.
So we'd come here, my sister and I, for the summers for a few weeks every year. And then after Boulder, I went to Thunderbird for a couple of years, knowing I wanted an international business career. And I moved here the first time, I think, in the early 90s.
Okay, what about your father?
Growing up, he was here in Japan while my mother and my sister and I were in Hawaii.
Okay.
And he would come back every couple months on Pan Am and come to see us for a couple weeks and come back here and work. He was running Cinerama Films at the time.
Is that
in
right?
the 60s and 70s.
Where's he from?
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah.
New Jersey guy. What's his ethnicity?
For many years I thought Berger, I thought we were German, but it turns out we're from Płock, Russia, which
You're
is
Russian, okay.
which is a suburb of Warsaw.
Did he know that?
We never talked about it, but it was during Euro football that my sister gave me our Ellis Island documents, and instead of in the 40s coming here, it was actually in the 1890s that my family immigrated from the UK, originally from Płock, Russia, the documents from Ellis Island say. So it turns out we're Polish. We're from a suburb of Warsaw.
Is that right? Wait, so that's, of course, your father's side, but so when they came over, was it your father's father and mother that came over?
Yes, yeah. It was,
okay.
My father was...
So your grandparents?
My grandparents. My father was 25 years older than my mother when they met here in Tokyo.
He's 25 years older than her. Okay, let me ask you this. Did you ever know your grandparents?
No.
Okay.
Not on my dad's side. My mom's side, certainly, yes.
All right. So how many siblings do you have?
An elder sister by 1 year and 2 older half-brothers from my dad's first marriage.
Do you know them?
Yeah, we're close as a family, yes.
He made it that way?
No, they were actually estranged when my father moved here moved to Japan. It was, I think, through my mother and my elder half-brother's efforts that we continue to be very close as a family. My mother wanted us to be close to our siblings, and then growing up, we became close to my elder brother's children. So although I'm their uncle, we're more like cousins in age.
Because how old is your older? How many years older is your older brother?
Same age as my mother. Now in their 80s, yeah.
And what about his brother? I mean, well, your second.
Yeah, my second is about 10 years younger than my elder brother.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's great because now every Thanksgiving there's almost 19 or 22 burgers that get together every year in Kona. So we're close as a family. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Have you brought your sons there?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Now we're on that next generation, of course, where my nephew's children are the same age as my children. So yeah.
Oh, that is neat.
Yeah.
That is neat. So growing up, what was it like for you? You grew up where?
In Honolulu. So
in Honolulu.
Born and raised.
Okay.
Honolulu, went to Punahou, and then to Boulder for 4 years, and then Thunderbird International Business School for 2.
Wow, what made you decide to do that? Wait, what kind of student were you? Let's go through school first of all. Because at school, when you're going through school, and first of all in Hawaii, there's such a mixture. I don't think there was ever any issue with you being, Polish, not knowing that, and Japanese when you were growing up.
Yeah, you're just haole. Yeah,
you're just haole.
Hapa haole, right?
Right. So everyone thought you were just really Hawaiian.
Well, local. I mean, when you're in Hawaii, when you leave Hawaii, people call you Hawaiian. But when you're in Hawaii, you're just a Japanese kid or Hapa haole kid. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So were you more academic or were you more sports minded?
Both. I played sports year round: football, basketball, baseball. But Punahou is a tough academic environment, and was never a surfer. Always after school went to athletics, and after athletics, you're studying at Punahou.
Really? So to be cool there, you had to get good grades, basically.
Yeah, Punahou is interesting because it's a college preparatory academy. So I think just like ASIJ would be here, 99% of kids go on to college, and sure enough, you get to college and you've been so well prepared that college is relatively easy compared to what you've done at Punahou.
Is that right? Well, is that where Obama went?
Yeah, same school. Yeah.
My
I think
goodness.
we've had we have
Quite a few.
yeah.
Some real illustrious people have
Yeah,
gone there.
certainly, yeah.
That's the top school in Hawaii.
We like to think it is. I think there's one or two other institutions.
What are the other ones? What are the others?
Iolani and Kamehameha probably would say that they're
Right.
right up there academically, but I think Punahou puts out what I would say the most well-rounded kids. I think, I think there's people that are come out to be more. Well, anyway, professionally, I think that we've done very well. Yeah.
When did you start to know? When did you know that Punahou was a good school? How old were you when you realized that it wasn't like all the other schools? I don't think that's something they tell the kids when they first come in. Like,
no, I think they do that. You know that you're special to be there. Yeah, it's a very.
How was that?
Well, it's challenging again. I went to actually Iolani, the other school, in kindergarten, but at the time Iolani was an all-boys school.
Okay.
And Punahou was co-ed, and my sister was at Punahou, so it was easier, I think, for transportation logistics to put us in the same school. But I think from an early age, you know that you're in a privileged school environment, and you're told that you're special, or you're told that you're on the upside of the academic spectrum. So I think they do promote that.
So you knew that all along?
Yeah, we knew that.
So when you saw other kids in other schools, what was your attitude, kind of?
Not so much in other schools, but I think there's a definite divide in Hawaii between public and private schools. And you know you're privileged. I mean, Punahou is the largest private kindergarten through 12 institution in the United States. It's over 3,000 students. I think the largest private school west of the Mississippi. It's been around since 1842. Established by? Hawaii missionaries.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think up until now, it's interesting because it was known to be the Haole School. But now when you look at the faces on campus, it's like a Benetton world. It's a mix. I think much like Hawaii is. It's not separated Haole, Japanese, Hawaiian anymore. It's very much a mix.
Yeah, who can get in gets in.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Hawaii is that I think we are the most multicultural state in the union. I think
there's no doubt about
you've
that.
never sensed a sense of racial issues.
Yeah, not belonging. Yeah. Just there. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. So, what were your sports that you really liked?
Growing up, I played tennis, but then sure enough, I think around high school or maybe middle school, switched. I played baseball and flag football as well, and then in high school, switched to the pads and basketball, baseball. Just back then it was you played 3 sports year round. It was kind of the standard thing to do, unlike now where you focus on one sport probably by junior high. It's different back then.
Okay. Now, Dad and Mom, your mom was in your life all the way through. Was your dad in your life? They stayed together?
They stayed together through high school time, but at the end they did separate. But growing up, my dad just wasn't around. So I think I was very lucky that I had a very strong mother who gave us a very strong home. But I think I give a lot of credit, like many of us who did go to Punahou. Punahou raises you. I think there's so many extracurricular activities, and it's a very warm and embracing academic environment. And I think people that go there feel very fortunate to go there. But now as a parent, you realize how unique Punahou is, and how Punahou is not the best environment for many kids. And because it does push academics so strongly, or you have to act a certain way, or and I think there's just more awareness now of how academic institutions support the students that are there. There's probably a standard way of educating children, which I think Punahou has evolved as well. But I think now having children of my own, understanding that one went for 1 year to Punahou, my elder one, Noa, but the other one, Luca, that would not have been the right environment for him. And he went to boarding school when we moved back to the States.
But they're both out of school now, right?
They're both in university now.
Oh, they are?
Noah, the elder one, is at Thunderbird, followed me to Boulder and Thunderbird. And Luca, the younger one, is a junior at the University of Miami.
What is he studying?
They're both studying international business. Noah focused on finance, and Luca's focused on marketing. And he's going to be spending January a term in France, where he's focusing on picking up and bettering his French.
Luca?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, he always speaks French.
They spoke some growing up. Luca not as well as Noa, but now Luca has spent the last 2 summers doing homestay, and he's really focused on bettering his French.
Oh, that's neat. That's
Yeah.
neat. Now, when you graduated from Thunderbirds, what did you graduate with?
What they call a Master's in International Management, MIM degree.
Okay. What made you decide to go that route?
I knew I wanted to be abroad. I studied international business and finance at Boulder, but the placement office in Boulder, it's a public institution, it's a huge school, wasn't that strong. And I had gotten a job in New York at the same time when I applied to Thunderbird, but I didn't do it in time to get in for the fall semester. So after I finished Boulder, I had 6 months, worked in New York doing that internship more or less, and then had school starting, Thunderbird starting in January. And what a difference that year and a half made at Thunderbird. Again, schools or companies at the time were coming to recruit international business career-minded people, and being at Boulder with no opportunities and coming out of Thunderbird with 6 or 7 job opportunities all abroad, excuse me, was night and day. So I came abroad right after I graduated from grad school, and my whole life, the last 30 years, has been international.
So you were 21, 22?
22 at the time.
22 when you got out of school.
Yeah. And I did study Japanese, and that was my focus. Even though I spoke it growing up, I took it. You need to have a proficiency test to graduate.
Can you read and write as well?
Not kanji well enough for a paper, just hiragana, katakana. But this is an era when we're fortunate enough to have translators, and nowadays you got to be on your own. It's impossible unless you're completely fluent. But I was fortunate. But I knew at the time that I didn't want to be a Japan expert. So out of the 6 jobs offers I had out of Japan, I had one in Korea. I took the Korea job.
Is that right?
Yeah, I took the Korea job. I knew that if I started my career at a Toshiba or a Sandoz pharmaceutical, that I would be the salaryman taking the train to work, wearing a suit, and I would start my career. I would probably never have a chance to grow. So I actually envisaged myself 20 years forward being that salaryman, which I didn't want to be. So I took the job that was in Korea, where it was more of a trading function.
How did you know by that time? Had you been to Japan before?
So yeah, certainly it's like growing up, coming here every summer, taking the train, just knowing that you get on that treadmill, be that cog in the machine.
So you saw it
I very clearly knew that was a path that I did not want to go.
Your father didn't talk to you about that, or was it a...
No, he was an entrepreneur, and I think the entrepreneurial flame has always been there in my mind. My half-brother also is an entrepreneur. My dad worked for himself, so I knew that I probably needed some experience. But ultimately, I saw that I would probably end up working for myself, and ultimately, I don't know, 10 or 15 years later, that's what ended up happening.
Wait, 10 or 15 years later after finishing college?
Yeah, so I had a career, so I took a job with, maybe you'll remember, a company called Wilson Suede and Leather, a leather retailer.
Yeah.
I was running the sales purchasing office in Korea. Actually, I wasn't running.
That was your first job in
my
Korea.
first job, yeah. And then I got promoted after a year and a half.
Now, what year was this?
Hong Kong.
What year is this?
This is 89, 90.
Okay, 89. Okay, that's just right after the bubble burst. The bubble was bursting.
Well, I take that back.
89, 90. Yeah.
Wait, 87 Boulder, 89 Thunderbird. Yeah, so
Yeah.
90. I'm in Korea.
Yeah.
This is just after the Olympics. Actually, 89 after the Seoul Olympics.
Yeah.
We got promoted to run the Hong Kong office in 90. Did that for a little bit.
A year after being there?
Yeah, a year and a half. Yeah, it was very fortunate. Then I'm sourcing leather goods out of China.
Out of China then? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It would have been, but it just
So-
started.
Yeah.
It had just started to come out, yeah.
So I was going into China early days, and then I switched jobs, stayed in the garment business. I joined a company called Odyssey, which was a garment manufacturer, down high-end leather, high-end functional garments. They own North Face, Sierra Designs, Head Sportswear. So it was a branded company. It was a factory OEM maker, but making brands and also making for Japanese companies under their own brands. And that was my first business coming back to Japan on the sales side.
Wow. That was your first time coming to Japan? With
Odyssey?
With
as an employee in starting my career, right?
You wanted to be an employee now, so you weren't running it?
No, I was an employee. I was early in my career. But
what was your position when you came? I mean, what was
I was heading sales, trying to get companies like Itochu to use our factories to make garments for their brands.
So how'd that go?
It was challenging. It was challenging. Yeah, because I wasn't an expert either on the garment side nor in Japanese business, and I didn't have any relationships because I was young in my career. So all three kind of assets you normally need to have to be successful weren't there for me. But again, early in your career, you're there to learn, and you learn to grow, you're trying to grow yourself, and sales is certainly a way to cut your teeth. It's something you got to wake up and really focus on, and not be afraid to make mistakes and keep trying. And I recommend to any young kid, and I put my kids in that situation, is start in sales now. Yeah, get that effort going. Learn how to pick up the phone, not to be afraid of rejection. Keep standing back up once you get knocked down, because it's going to happen to you time and time again in every aspect of life.
Isn't that true? Let me ask you this, Ken. Now I'm going to try to get into those questions that I'm trying to get into. Think throughout your life. It doesn't have to be that time. Anytime you want to, what was one of the biggest challenges that you faced up till now? How old are you now? You're 57. 57. Up till now, what's one of the biggest challenges first, and how did it affect you, and what did you do to solve it?
Soon thereafter, my career evolved. Odyssey went bankrupt, and I started a new career, and I joined, or I put my heart into getting into the sports business. And I just cold called, and I sent a letter into IMG in Cleveland. And to this day, many people say you're one of the few senior guys at IMG at the time. Ultimately, what I ended up being promoted to, that came through the HR department, because most people there's a lot of nepotism there, where there's whether it's sons of CEOs or brothers of tennis players. That's a lot of people that were in the company at the time. But I was very fortunate that I had one line of expertise, which was licensing, which started when I was at Odyssey. I didn't know what licensing was. We'd go and license the North Face to a Japanese manufacturer. I said, people pay you for that? I couldn't understand the idea of, and Starter was a big brand at the time, and Starter was big with US sports licenses, but they're also licensing the Starter S and Star logo all around the world. I said, wow, this is interesting. Getting paid for allowing another company to use your trademarks. So I had some experience in there with Odyssey, and I parlayed that in the licensing department at IMG, where IMG represented Major League Baseball outside the United States. They represented Wimbledon, British Open, Arnold Palmer, the umbrella mark. So IMG represented the brand owners for those trademarks. And so the job that I took, because I understood licensing, was selling those trademarks to licensees in Asia. So I was very fortunate. I came into IMG in a very unique, specialized department, which is not your traditional media rights or sponsorship sales or athlete representation, but licensing. And I proved to be successful in doing it. Again, going back to the sales, I would literally fly into Singapore or Bangkok, open up a phone book and call companies, and literally, go in first meetings. I was very fortunate that IMG, because their other businesses had a platform and a brand, so that would get me in the door. But then I would go and try to pitch licenses, and I sold Major League Baseball to Matahari department stores, an Indonesian department store, on the New York Yankees logo. So it was little things like that, again, getting your nose to the grinder and just picking up the phone and not being afraid to make calls, and finding out what you're deficient in, and making materials yourself to help you pitch the next client, something you didn't have before the last round, and just bettering yourself and learning about your product and making materials to allow you to help you sell it better.
That was your biggest challenge? Your biggest challenge?
Well, I think ultimately my life challenge was when I switched jobs. That was how I got into sports. Mm-hmm. But after that, I left IMG to join IMG's rival, which was a company called ISL. Mm-hmm. So ISL has been in the news in recent years because of the Olympic scandals and this and that, the bribery scandals, and right or wrong, I don't know how ISL at the senior levels was involved in all that, but ISL had the World Cup sponsorship rights. They created the Olympic Top program, and I joined that company from IMG in 1999. In preparation for the 2002 FIFA World Cup in Japan and Korea. So I was recruited by a friend who was working at ISL, and they said, we need somebody to run the office there in preparation for the World Cup. So I said, okay, that's interesting, but I don't want to do an event job. Does this have a career or some longevity to it? And they said, well, Dentsu's backing out of their 49%. The Dassler sisters, who owned Adi Dassler, their father, were pursuing an IPO strategy for ISL, and would I like to join the company now that they were buying back Dentsu's 49% share to 10%. Said, okay, if it means running the office and having a career. So I took on that opportunity, had the FIFA World Cup, coming in 3 years' time, exciting period. But ISL ends up going bankrupt. They invested in Brazilian football clubs. They bought championship auto racing, kart racing. They had the 9 events called the Tennis Masters Series underneath the Grand Slams, where they paid $1 billion over 10 years for those 9 events. They were in a spending spree in order to diversify the portfolio away from just soccer and Olympics. A year and a half after joining, they go bankrupt right before the World Cup. I was fortunate in that Korea and Japan were the only 2 offices ISL had to keep running, but FIFA took us over. So basically, we had the event to deliver in 14 months' time. And so I basically had a runway where I knew I wasn't going to have a job 14 plus 6 months after the event. The challenge was, really making a conscious decision. Newly married with a child, bought a brand new place, and I think maybe you recall Daikanyama address was the newest condo at the time, bought a place there. My son's health wasn't well, so I had 3 of these pressures: child's health, home pressure, work pressure, and again, a new mortgage, and that was probably the most challenging time of my life. Was I knew I wasn't gonna have a job yet. I have all these financial pressures and the health pressures, and I had to make a choice. Do I try to find a job? Do I start my own business? If I start my own business, do I run it as an entrepreneur, not speaking fluent reading, writing Japanese, having 1 assistant and translator, or do I make myself look bigger, have 4 or 5 staff, but have that risk and expense? I knew I didn't want to end up going the salary route again. I knew I wanted to start my own business. I knew that if I was working at my house with an assistant, that I would never have the chance to grow the scale that I wanted to. So I took the most risky route, and even though ultimately it proved successful, going through those 3 to 5 years where my spouse had her own business, I was starting my own business. I was very fortunate in that I was late on rent 3 or 4 months at a time, couple times, but my landlord supported me. Never late on payroll with my 4 or 5 staff, but that was the biggest challenge of my life, was going through the financial pressures with everything on the line, borrowing money, all of those challenges that you hear about, and waking up at sweats at 3 and 4 in the morning for, a couple times a week when rent is due.
When did you finally come up for air and feel like, finally I can breathe now? And what had you done to get yourself to that point? Because you're deep down in the water.
Yeah.
You can see the surface up there, but it looks like it's far, far, far away.
Yeah.
When did you break the surface and come up and go, and how'd you get up there?
Yeah, I think, and I share this with young kids when I speak to them about pursuing your passion careers, is you have to do something that you want to do. So it's fun to wake up in the morning, but even with all that pressure, you have to evolve. And I think every entrepreneur goes through that. You have to shift, you have to pivot, you have to see where the opportunities, and it's not a matter of ultimately pursuing what you want to do, because that's always in the back of your mind. Bankruptcies don't happen with profitable businesses only, or unprofitable business. They happen because of cash flow, right? So you could be profitable, project that but if you don't have that cash flow to get through those next 3 to 6 months. And so that was the thing, we pivoted, and I was able to get enough and scramble enough to shift and move and do deal here to get us through the next 3 months to get where. And
well, take me through that. That's the part I want to go to, because you can talk that, you can say it, but a kid can't tell what you're talking about. A child wouldn't understand. Let's say a young man that's going through it. What was a pivot for you? A phone call, or did you actually have friends that came to your aid and someone said, here's the cash you need to get you through till then, don't worry about getting it back right now? Or
no, I started as a sponsorship sales agency and licensing agency. So we were representing WWE at the time, and we're just trying to do small deals. And I set up the business actually where the guys that I brought on to stay with me, I said I brought 3 or 4 guys on. I said, listen, I'm gonna arrange a good payout from the company, from FIFA at the time, to make sure that you're taken care of for the next 6 months. So I did things that were appropriate, because that's obligatory from a financial standpoint when you're closing down a company. But I wanted them to know that I was pushing for them and getting them maximum, that believe in me, because we're going to start something new. So that was a bit of a bridge in the beginning. And then as we're representing WWE, trying to get licensing deals done, I realized that that was taking longer than it was going to allow me to make it. So we ended up finding a very unique opportunity, just as ISL had done with FIFA, where they secured the rights for media and sponsorship sales. All of a sudden, I saw an opportunity, and I had visited Europe a couple times during this period on personal issues. But I went and visited the International Baseball Federation. So the IBAF, International Baseball Federation, is based in Lausanne, Switzerland. It was run at the time by an Italian named Aldo Notari, and the general secretary was a Spanish guy. So although everyone thinks, the baseball awareness and power is obviously in the USA or Japan, all the international federations that are global in nature and want to be in the Olympics, and this time baseball had just been included in the Olympics. But every event they were doing, their world championships, and they had what they call a baseball World Cup, were run out of this federation in Switzerland, in Lausanne. So I visited with them and I said, listen, I'd like to buy out the rights, because the model that was being used in football, soccer at the time, and other sports was that the organization would sell global sponsorships. But in this case with baseball, because they were so small, they would grant the rights to a LOC, a local organizing committee, and that LOC would not get funding from the federation but had to monetize itself. So every event they would do, let's say the qualifying for Asian positions for the Olympics would be run, all the commercial aspects would be concentrated in for just that one event in that local organizing committee.
How'd you find out all that? Wait, how'd you find that? Wait, how'd you know all this?
Well, because I just worked with FIFA for the World Cup, so I knew their structure and I knew how that was successful, whereas baseball and these other smaller sports, they're run as one-offs. And so the funding doesn't come from the federation, but from the organizers who bid to organize it, then they have to monetize.
You already knew this.
I figured it out after talking to the IBF.
Okay.
So I went there and I said, listen, instead of granting the rights to the organizing committee, why don't we pay you and you reserve it for us? And then I'm able to work out a deal directly with the federation versus the organizing committee.
Pay him with what?
Well, that was.
Wait, come on, let's get. I want to get down to nitty gritty.
Yeah, so that's where I found the opportunity, where I had enough credibility because I'd been in the sports business for a while, but frankly I didn't have the money. So I guaranteed half of what I knew I could sell it at, and I went and did a deal selling the rights to Hakuhodo before I even had the rights from the IBAF, and I was able to. Well, actually, I don't say that. Before I managed the cash flows in order to sell and secure money, which was greater than what I had to pay more than what I had to pay the federation.
How much time difference?
About 6 months. So what happened was Beijing was coming in 2008, and so the qualifying event was 2007. I went around 2000, probably 4 or 5, secured the rights, and I was able to, again, back end.
Okay, wait. You secured the rights without any cash, just a promise.
Mm-hmm. Just a promise, yeah.
They didn't check?
They didn't check, no.
Because had they checked, you wouldn't have had it.
I wouldn't have had it.
Okay.
Not at that time. I basically,
so you sold yourself. They trusted you. They liked you. So in other words, if you didn't have salesman skills and they didn't like your appearance, the way you spoke, you'd been fini.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you had nothing else.
If they had just asked me for a bank guarantee on the money that I was promising them,
right.
Yeah, I would have been toast.
Been done.
Yeah.
So you basically had to use you.
Yeah.
Thing, what else do you have? You had nothing else.
Thank you. I never thought of it that way, but certainly, yeah.
Isn't that the truth? Because you had nothing. You didn't pull up in a Ferrari. You had nothing other than you when you came there.
I had credibility because, again, I had run the FIFA office.
But that's true.
I had, yeah, and the other properties around it. So, again, we started as a licensing business representation, trying to do WWE. Baseball comes in. I have credibility from my past life in sports. Then, again, another pivot.
Was there anyone they called, like a friend that you knew, if they called him and say he's good? You see what I'm saying? It's hard to see someone that you know from nowhere and knowing nothing about you unless there was someone that you knew that knew them that they really trusted.
No, I think
You understand what I'm saying?
Well, again, I was running the FIFA World Cup office in Japan, so my credibility was high, and again, they're European, they're Italian and Spanish guys there in Switzerland. I'm going to Switzerland because that's where the FIFA headquarters are. So as a professional, I had position in the market, and I was going there on FIFA business, and I said I'm starting my new agency. So I think I had the professional credibility, but not the personal credibility, not necessarily the professional, because I knew I was starting my own company when I first approached them. But ultimately, with that baseball deal, again, selling the rights to Olympic qualifying, which is quite meaningful in Asia, where in other markets it's a given the U.S. is going to qualify. Qualification events aren't that valuable, but when it comes to European football or Olympic qualifying, it is quite valuable, and certainly, in Japan, Taiwan, Korea, baseball is a big sport. So that's basically, we sold the rights to Hakuhodo, and Hakuhodo was selling the rights onto the Japanese market, and then I did another deal in Korea. So we made a nice chunk of change there, which gave me breathing room. And then what I did after that was, I think if you go back in time, if you can remember, the three carriers, it was Vodafone, KDDI, and Docomo at the time, each had their own network. It was the flip phones, and you had to get on the front of the deck, and they were just getting into putting content. So again, 15 years ago, it would take 2 minutes to download 15 seconds, not the other way around, right? Now it takes 3 seconds to download 2 minutes. But at the time, there was what we call Koshiki mobile sites, Koshiki official. Mm-hmm. And on all three of those carriers, you'd have to lobby and try to get your technical background support to mesh up with each of those different networks. We had guys doing that side, but what we did was we secured the licenses for the official mobile sites for WWE, UFC, NFL, ESPN, PGA, LPGA, Serie A, and we did a bicycle. I think we had 8 or 9 sites, and we were the official NBA site. So people would pay us 315 yen a month. I think those who were here back then remember. And then you'd have access to official content and video content. In the end, not that many people were looking at the video content, but that was our marketing edge. We'd say we're official, and you could see live or near live news and highlights online. And we never got MLB, but again, you wanted those properties that were successful and interesting enough where people would pay you, right? But you didn't want the news to be ubiquitous, because then they could get the highlights for free over the news services. They could just open up the paper. So baseball was, even though MLB was hugely popular at the time, it wasn't necessarily a differentiator because people would know the results without being a member. If you wanted to find out what happened on Raw or SmackDown, you'd have to go to the WWE official site. NBA wasn't as big 15 years ago as it is now. So we had people willing to pay us that $3 a month for that news and information, and of course, the video content, which again was a marketing edge, which people weren't necessarily using. And so that business was ultimately what added value to my business, because that was a real cash flow business. That wasn't a one-off trade in respect to media rights or sponsorship sales. So that was, and it was a differentiator, because now as sports marketing Japan in the market, it made a difference that we had all these big international brands. And to your point, what was the edge that sold us in? One, of course, again, the background that we had already done with baseball. But once we got the NBA, then everything else changed, because then the credibility is there. WWE we already had to deal with because we already had that earlier relationship. But then once we had WWE, NBA, it was easy to get other properties because our credibility level was already there. So that was also a big learning, knowing that you need that one kind of linchpin property, and that could set the stage.
And
did
you already know that? Did you already feel that? You didn't know it until
I didn't know it until I did it. Yeah.
And once you got it, then everybody said,
everything
"Oh,
was
you
easy.
got that." Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That was a big learning. Yeah. But again, the pivoting, knowing that you see an opportunity, grab it. Don't be afraid to go after something. And then I was fortunate that I had a team behind me that could execute.
How many people?
Ultimately, SMJ Sports Marketing Japan grew to be about 11 people.
I'm talking about right then.
Oh.
That time,
we had
when you
4 or
guys were
5
sitting on
people.
needles.
4 or 5 people, yeah.
That's right.
And then after that, people wanted to come into
Of course, yeah.
because we're a sports company.
Whenever you got something good, everybody wants to be on the bandwagon.
Yeah, and I was fortunate that, we'd make everyone come on as interns. They basically, we'd say you could work, we'd give them transportation and lunch money.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
For how long? For how long?
Usually about 6 months.
Because I want to do that with this.
Yeah, then if they make it through the 6 month and they weed themselves out, it wasn't me weeding them out. It was the guys that they're working for and their colleagues that basically people know whether they want to stay or are recognized to be strong enough players that they're adding value that they will stay.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So that was really I mean, you were doing a hell of a lot of pivoting then. You could have been considered a ballerina at that time, huh?
Yeah, we were, and at the time, I was, again, Ines, she had her Miss Universe Japan business, and
that was all that time.
Yeah, that's why we were under huge pressure, and the kids were young, and we're really lucky to have a great nanny that would pick them up. So we take care of them in the morning, drop them off at school, and nanny would pick them up at 3, feed, bathe, eat, feed them, and we get home, outside of work, if there wasn't other things that we had to do as well, because there's a lot of entertaining that you have to do and being out in the market. Yeah, we were very fortunate to have a very strong and supportive nanny to help us during that tough time. But Ines's business was taken off with Miss Universe Japan, and I think she had a tough growth period too for 3 or 4 years. Where she was changing the concept, developing it, but she was doing all the business and I couldn't help her. Then all of a sudden, once I got over the hump where I could hire more people at SMJ, she hired us to do her business. So now, operationally, she didn't have to do sponsorship sales, she didn't have to service the clients, she concentrated on developing the girls and delivering the show. And then she went off like that.
Wow. But that helped you as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we were both, respectively, that we were both owned our own individual businesses, and we used the same office, so we saved on costs. And then, knock on wood, I saw the internet coming, and I knew this mobile official business was going to be hard to protect. Right. And I was fortunate enough to sell the business to Yoshimoto Kogyo in 2009.
Were you happy with what you sold it for?
Yeah, the idea then was to grow their sports business and become a bigger part of a bigger business, and us fuel them and they fuel us. Ultimately, they're a very domestic company, and it was challenging to integrate on their side. But they ultimately got, I think, 9 staff. They had 1 English speaker, the CFO before that, who was always very supportive of myself. Thunderbird graduate as well. Nakata-san, thank you very much. But they ended up taking, and having those 9 staff in their company. And
so they absorbed your people. Yeah. That's good.
After a year, we wanted to stay independent in Meguro, and before that, in Omotesando, we had a great office, but ultimately moved into the Shinjuku Shogakko. And then Ines stayed independent until she sold her business later that same year. And then we both we moved to Singapore 2011, 2 years after both of us sold our business in 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So where does that find you today? Where are you now?
In a very happy place called Honolulu, Hawaii, back home. Yeah.
You like being home?
Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been home now?
Since COVID, so March.
Oh, so you've been 4 years almost, yeah.
2.5 years?
Well,
almost 3 years.
COVID was 3 years.
Yeah, so almost 3 years. Yeah. Almost 3 years.
Oh, so you went during COVID?
Well, actually, we had moved to Singapore, 2000.
It was in 2019 was when COVID started. 2019, well, 2020.
Yeah, 2020 March.
Yeah,
is when I moved back.
Started,
so, I'd come back. After Singapore, I moved back to Hawaii where Noah graduated, and then came back to Tokyo to head up sales here with IMG, where I started my career. So I started in '94, came back. I'd say, was it 2000? No, 99? No, 19, sorry.
Okay, just
yeah, 19. Came back in 19, and then COVID hit a year and a half later, yeah. So now I've been back in Honolulu almost 3 years, and loving my life back home now.
What are your dreams from this time on? You're 57. 57. You'll probably live for another 43 years. You probably maybe 43 or maybe more, okay. What do you see Ken Berger doing this time? What's your big dream? Where do you, life is good now, you've been through the challenges that made you tough and feel good, and you say, oh, damn, you don't die from all that stuff. Well, even though you might have wanted to. What's your big dream now?
So much of the last 10 years has been focused on the boys. You know, like your 4 boys, I have 2 great boys, 22 and 21. And when we moved to Singapore, they were in middle school. And, you know, knock on wood, I was really fortunate to have the free time to spend time with them during their middle school years. I'm picking them up every day from school, taking them to their soccer practice and their jiu-jitsu practice. So I was really lucky to be able to spend quality time with them. You know, when they're younger, it's tough to really get a lot of value as a dad. When they're older, they want to focus on their friends in school and sports. So those middle years are really, again, not planned. It turned out that way, and I think they enjoyed my time with them, and I certainly did with on the flip side. I was lucky at that time when they started high school. I ended up running the UFC in Asia, so I did that for a couple years until Endeavor, who owns IMG, the company I used to work for, ended up buying the UFC and closing up Brazil, Singapore, and London. And that was a bit of time where it was a tough time for me, and that's when I moved to Hawaii the first time before I ended up coming back to IMG Tokyo for a couple years before COVID. But that was a great time too, and they ended up now becoming huge fans of mixed martial arts, and that's why they started their BJJ athletic career, and they continue to practice that now.
Your sons?
Yeah, my son. So I think, you know, my dream was always to be a dad that was present, which I didn't have. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have that time. Again, not by design, but ultimately when having that flexibility, I was really able to take advantage of it and focus on it. So moving forward, you know, I know that they have only a couple years left. They're finishing up their college and graduate degrees now. So I've made an effort to spend a lot of time with them now that I can, and now during the period in which that they have the flexibility, because I know once they start their careers or they have significant others, there'll be less opportunity to do so. So I think over the last couple years and over the next 18 months before they finish school, I just was with my elder son at the World Cup in Doha. So we went to the last 7 matches there. We take spring holiday for skiing together every year. I'm again fortunate that we have time and flexibility to spend a week over Thanksgiving. That's our big Berger family get together. So, you know, a week in the spring and the fall, and then hopefully, if they're not doing internships, we will continue to do our summer holidays in France. So I think the family time with the boys is probably on the top of my list. And then moving forward, as I move towards 60, and as they move on in their career, I think, like all of us, you know, we all enjoy traveling and seeing new things, and that continues to be my interest and passion, is going to new places. So this past year, took a cruise for the first time across the Mediterranean, spent some time in Saudi Arabia and Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi this past week. So I think exploring new markets and new places is proving to be, or continue to be, my passion and interest.
Do you think you'll make a business out of it? I mean,
a business out of it? No, I think that's on the personal side. The business part, I'm very fortunate to have a great project that I'm working on in Hawaii. It's pulling back onto my licensing experience, but as well as my history and heritage of growing up in Hawaii. There's an iconic personality called Duke Kahanamoku. He's the founder of the sport of surfing, former gold medalist and world record holder in swimming, a man of color who suffered a lot of the same indignities that Jim Thorpe and these other athletes who'd come back from the Olympics as darker skinned men. They'd be heroes, yet when they come home, they wouldn't be as welcomed in the real world as they are in the media.
In their world, you mean?
Yeah.
Because the world is the real world. That's
well, fair enough.
Yeah.
So we've licensed a documentary which has just come out. It's been well received. We're in discussions to tie up with a studio on a feature film. Again, that'll be a couple years down the road. But that's where I'm focusing my efforts, is on Duke and developing his IP. A couple other projects we're doing outside of the theatrical version. The WSL World Surf League is going to be naming their trophy the WSL Duke Kahanamoku Championship Trophy for both men and for women.
You set that up? You
Yeah,
helped
that's been a lot of the work behind the scenes, yeah.
That's good. That's
And
good.
then we're working with the state legislature and Senate to get the governor to sign off on a Duke Kahanamoku license plate. You know, he was in the 1912
Yeah.
Antwerp Games and I think continued to the 30s. So he participated in 4 Olympic Games and five medals.
Wow, that is beautiful. Ken, the way that I like to end the podcast is asking this one final question.
Yes, sir.
Knowing what you know now, you've been on the planet for 57 years, and I think the first 5 years don't count, so let's say 52 years, knowing what's going up. Let's say you could go back in time, and you could see the young Ken. What time would you go back to, and what advice would you give this young Ken?
I could frame a lot of the questions that you've posed to me today and look at it through my boys' eyes. And I think that's the one thing that I already see myself telling them is not to be afraid and not to think that you get so ashamed and you get so worried that you think everyone's looking at you, and every kid is very self-conscious of that, is I think not to be self-conscious and not to worry about what other people think and just do you. And I think pursue your dreams. That, you know, again, I'm very lucky in that many parents ask me to talk to their children because many children want to work in sport. So by definition, I've over the last decade had many lunches or coffees with younger children and guys and kids that are similar in age to my children and younger. And I think that's what I would say is like we all learn. I think it's pretty common. Follow your passion, because if you enjoy something and you're good at it, then ultimately you'll be able to find some way to manage it and make it into a career.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ken, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Really,
Fantastic.
thanks. I appreciate talking with you.
Thank you so much. All of you watching this podcast, make sure you press like and subscribe. And remember, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars because you're too blessed to be stressed.